To Kenya next, where activists accuse authorities of ignoring a court order that halted the establishment of a US-backed Ebola quarantine facility in the country. Located about 200 kilometers north of Nairobi, the center was designed to receive and quarantine Americans who may have been exposed to the Ebola virus in neighboring DRC. Although Kenya has never recorded an Ebola case, it remains a key U.S. ally in Africa. President William Ruto has defended the planned facility, describing it as part of a broader health partnership between Kenya and the United States. He also revealed plans to set up 24 additional Ebola preparedness centers across the country, funded with U.S. support. The project has sparked strong opposition, with many Kenyans questioning the decision to bring potentially exposed individuals into the country. In the town of Nanyuki, residents have staged a series of protests against the facility. Tensions have escalated in recent weeks, and 2 people were killed after some demonstrations turned violent. Last month, a Kenyan court ordered that the facility should not become operational while legal challenges were ongoing. Shortly afterward, Health Minister Aden Duale directed that construction work be suspended. Despite these directives, activists claim authorities have continued to move the project forward. Our reporter did a straw poll of a dozen people in the streets of Nanyuki. Unsurprisingly, not one of them spoke out in favor. Here's one local lawyer we spoke to right next to the base who gave us a general sense of the public opinion.
And the status so far is that we as citizens are very concerned that despite there being court orders that are existent, the CS held Duale, despite him promising in court that they will stop the further establishment of the quarantine facility in Kenya. We have news that we have 7 patients who have been quarantined here. The other day we saw in the news that the president of Kenya stating that this is a country which is governed by the rule of law. However, the state itself is in contempt of court orders. Currently, as we speak, citizens here are very concerned that if there is a case of an outbreak, and if one resident from Nanyuki is affected, the whole country will come to a total shutdown. Tourism will be affected, the education businesses will be affected, and it's a very, very worrying situation. Once again, the CS is in contempt of the High Court orders, the government is in contempt of the High Court orders. We are in a lawless country as we speak right now.
I'd like to welcome Nora Bagathi, the executive director of the Katiba Institute, one of the organizations that took the government to court over continued operation of the base. Nora, do you have hard evidence, documents, eyewitnesses, maybe even satellite imagery that Americans are actually inside that facility? Or is your suit still based on Samaritan Purse's own statement?
So we don't have hard evidence that there are people being held at the facility under the agreement. We're very much operating off the public statements that have been made by US officials and the media reporting. Our underlying suit, I should note, isn't about people being held at the facility, but is about the process by which this facility was established. And we moved to contempt once before when the court orders were disrespected and the facility continued being built. And the government came, apologized for that and promised that they wouldn't do that, would now abide by the court orders. So it's very concerning to us to hear that there are people being held at the facility, but we haven't heard anything from the Kenyan government with that regard.
As you know, 2 protesters in Nanyuki died from gunshot wounds during demonstrations against the facility. Do you hold the government responsible for that? And has anybody been held accountable?
So it is a massive problem, and again, accountability in both those killings and a lot of the killings we're seeing in the context of protests and policing. There hasn't been accountability, and so that is a real problem. It also points to the point which we make in the lawsuit, which is there is a real need and a real desire for public participation and for consultation on this thing. And most importantly, there is a constitutional obligation to engage in that.
You said any individual involved in violating the court order betrayed the public trust. Are you still pursuing individual officials? Who specifically do you believe authorized this?
So again, that is part of the problem with us not having official information around this. We are taking a close look at the reports that do exist, and if it seems that there is the need to go to court over the violation in specific, then we will do that. If there is the need to seek another contempt order, then we will do that. It would be outrageous if that was the case, because again, we've all heard Honorable Douale promise an open court so that the court orders would be respected. But we are still looking into this because we are still operating just with the public reports, and the Kenyan government has not yet pronounced itself.
And that health minister who you just spoke about, Aden Douale, apologized to the judge after being accused of contempt of court. Let's listen.
I have directed the immediate and complete cessation of any intended construction, site preparations, or related activities concerning Laikipia Air Base facility, pending the hearing and determination of the substantive petition or until further orders of this court.
I should mention, he went on to say he remains committed to the full observance of the ruling. So in your opinion, as one of the litigants, is he still showing disregard for the law?
If there are people currently at the facility under the agreement, there is a complete disregard for the law. The court orders are very clear. It is not just about the building and the establishment of the facility. That is, of course, what he responded to in that clip, because that is what the contempt case was about, the continued building of the facility. But the court orders are very clear. No person can be transferred under the agreement who has been exposed to Ebola in order to quarantine at the facility or otherwise. So any movement by the government on this would definitely be a violation.
I want to make something very clear, or get something very clear. As far as Katiba Institute is concerned, what's the problem here? Is it the very specific allegation, the principle of authorities violating a court order, or the idea that the Kenyan government is permitting the quarantining of Ebola-exposed foreign nationals on Kenyan soil?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because our case really actually goes to the heart and substance of constitutional process and the need to follow constitutional process. We need to be able to see the impact assessments, the contingency plans that have been made around this. We need to see that those have actually taken place the way they should. We need to see that Parliament was involved in the way that it should be involved. We need to see that public participation has happened in the way that it should happen. These are all constitutional provisions that are there for a reason. They're not just tick box exercises. They're real processes that protect the people living in Kenya and that protect us should the facility, in fact, be harmful or pose a risk to the lives of Kenyans. And so our lawsuit is really about process and following the constitutional law. It is not, we are not public health experts. It is not about whether we think the facility is a good idea or not. The process, the constitutional process, should make that very clear.
Nora, assuming that your allegations are in fact true, why do you think the Kenyan government is doing this, defying the rule of law in the country that it governs, by all appearances anyway, at the behest of a foreign power?
So I think there are two things. So the first thing to note is, again, we aren't currently saying that the government is in contempt of this. We haven't filed a contempt motion for the foreign nationals that are supposedly being held at the facility, in part, again, because we're looking into what the facts around this are. And it is quite shocking to us that with those reports having taken place, there still hasn't been an official or public communication from the Kenyan government. But so our case really revolves around the establishment of the facility. The case where we had taken the government to court over contempt, and the government, in fact, was found liable for contempt, was the case where they continued building despite the court orders. And so that goes to the heart again of what does our constitution actually mean? It's not a suggestion, it is mandatory. And so you can't just go around violating court orders and think you can get away with it.
What's at stake if your suit doesn't succeed?
I think the the true constitutional order is at stake with this suit. Again, the Constitution isn't a suggestion, and processes must be followed correctly. The question of public health and how one deals with infectious diseases in a safe manner, again, that is not something we are experts on, but it is something that many people are experts on. And the reason why the Constitution sets out the law and the process in the way that it does is so that these experts and the people who should be tasked with making this decision and feeding into this decision, including the impacted communities in that area, are able to do so. And so this matter really goes to the heart of protecting our constitutional processes and transparency regulations, not just to the issue of this particular facility.
Noor Bagathi, Executive Director, Katiba Institute, thank you.
Thank you.